Question?
I have a question about antidepressants. Can antidepressants take on like signs and symptoms of an eating disorder or even cause an eating disorder because of side effects or anything like that?
Do you have specific information?
I've never heard of that before. No.
I've never heard of that being a cause, and
I was just thinking maybe, you know, a lot of drugs can cause you to be nauseous or anything like that, and I just kind of wondered.
Okay. Hi. You know, there's no actual facts about antidepressants, or being depressed. But I know that from personal experience that, you know, maybe after I already had my treatment and everything, if I became depressed again, it could trigger it back. So I could see that being a possibility.
what about taking antidepressants and going on or off of them?
Oh, that's a no-no. Yeah. Yeah, that can trigger a lot too.
So it's not necessarily the antidepressant itself that would trigger it, but because an eating disorder is not about weight and not about food, it's about emotional and biological distress that the body's going through. It's not uncommon, I think, that somebody may be depressed and they may be given an antidepressant. And sometimes things occurring together does not necessarily mean causality. I'm sure some of you in here have had to suffer through statistics. And I think also if somebody is misdiagnosed and they're given an antidepressant, that might make it worse, but it's not the antidepressant itself. Does that make sense? Do you have something to say?
No, I agree with what Barbara's saying. The majority of patients with eating disorders, I think, suffer from a comorbid depression or anxiety disorder. And so much so, I think, in the majority of cases, this is really more of an anxiety issue. It's part of an anxiety disorder. And so, actually, sometimes medications can be very helpful for some of those patients, but I've never heard of it triggering an eating disorder.
Why don't people with eating disorders just start eating?
I'll start and then you can take over. So, as a dietitian that I work with the eating disorders every day, one of the big complaints I get from my clients is that their parents tell them just to eat. Well, just eat. If you could just eat, then everything would be fine.
Especially the dad.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But actually, it's really not that simple. There's a lot of fears around foods and a lot of fear around what the food will do to them, a lot of body image distortion, that when even they're in the presence of a food that's fearful for them, that they become very anxious. And they literally feel like they cannot eat. It's not like they don't want to eat or whatever, it's more that they feel like they cannot eat. And a lot of the times they can't even verbalize what will happen, what they believe will happen to them if they eat. But that they're just it's almost a fear of anxiety around food. And so we talk a lot about in our program about, you know, I call it, using the words I use, I call it the food police voice. So it means that they have a lot of this big voice inside their head, which for some people is representative of their mom when they were really young, or their cousin, or it's just this voice that they've come up with that tells them this food is good, this food is bad, and not just this food's good and bad, because we all get that message, but you're a bad person if you eat this food. And so that fear around becoming a bad person and what will happen to me if I eat is very strong. And then there's also the medical component, which is really important. You can't just start eating when you haven't been eating. So there's a whole process of refeeding that has to occur, and doing it in a way that makes the person feel comfortable and confident, and helps them not only just eat, but start to change their relationship with food. Because like Barb and Tony have both already said, it's really not about the food. The food is just a symptom of a very deeper problem. So let's say someone can just start to eat, which is very rare. They'll probably develop some other issues such as substance abuse or something if they don't really deal with the deeper problem.
I explain it as a food phobia or a fat phobia. If any of you have a phobia, do any of you have any kind of phobia, you know, heights, spiders, snakes, anything like that? You don't have to admit it, just think in your head. And think about that irrational fear that you feel when that giant spider is starting to walk up your leg. Now you know intellectually this spider isn't going to do anything to you, but that food police mind, that spider police mind is saying, oh my God, you're going to die. And that feeling of anxiety, of fear, which is similar to if you have to do public speaking, if you're not used to it, that's the number one, anxiety. So it's that physical anxiety fear, and you physically can't eat. It's, and you can see it in people's faces when I say, I want you to try this, and you see it, and it's just terror. It's not a logical thing. Anxiety isn't logical. It's nothing to do with logical, which makes it hard for people to understand. I don't get it. Why don't they just eat? Well, I don't get it. Why don't you just go pick up the tarantula and pet it? Okay? But it's very easy for people to have a spider phobia in the world. You just ignore the spiders, you stay away from them, and you get your roommate to chase the spider out of the room. But you can't avoid food. You have to be faced with it all the time. Did your parents say just eat, or just don't do this? And any doctors say just eat?
I think everyone probably said just eat. Yeah, basically. I mean, trying to experience it back, it's kind of like, it's still to this day, like sometimes like I'll look at food and I'll smell it and it'll make me sick. Yeah. And it's hard. It's a never-ending struggle.
It's a physical response. Physical response.
Yeah.